Hi, welcome to these notes. These notes is all about the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is this very large expression here, this equation where we are solving for x. This is something you do have to have memorized. It's not something that will be given to you on any test. So do you guys remember when we would factor? Like for instance, if I take a look at number 1, factors of, oh, this is not a good example. Let's take a look at example number 2. Factors of 1 that would add to 4. Like, oh, there's no such thing, and you would write down prime. So what this formula does is it makes prime obsolete. So we can now come up with values for every quadratic function using this formula. So now you know on any quiz or test, you cannot write the word prime. There will be some sort of solution. So this is used mostly for whenever an equation is not easily factorable. Okay. Now our first one, if you take a look at this example, it is easily factorable, but we're going to just apply with the quadratic formula. It's a good one to start with. So anyway, your very first step is to make sure that all of our quadratic equations are in the standard form. So hopefully, you have gotten used to always put everything into the standard form before you start anything. So this is, I talk about how you have to learn this process. Again, it's right there, again, even with quadratic formula. Now that we take a look at number 1, we see that it is set equal to 0. Our next step, what I'm going to have you guys do, is write down the values for A, B, and C. Okay, so A, B, and C. So I have A, B, and C. You don't have to write it above every single time, but we can do it for this first one on our notes. So A is 1, B is 3, C is 2. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our substitutions, putting all of these numbers into the quadratic formula. So I'm going to start with x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. Now, the reason I chose these numbers is, again, B, B, and then A, C, all divided by 2 times A, which is 1. Now what we're going to do here is we are going to simplify. Negative 3 plus or minus, nothing we can simplify there yet. 3 squared is 9. 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. Divided by 2 times 1 is 2. We keep simplifying. We have 9 minus 1. 9 minus 8 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Now when I come down here, I have this plus or minus. What this means is I have, actually let's write this over here. I have negative 3 plus 1 divided by 2. I also have negative 3 minus 1 divided by 2. So I will have 2 answers. Now remember, you know that you will have these 2 answers because we're dealing with x squared. X squared tells us that we will have 2 solutions. Remember, these 2 solutions are where it will intersect on the x-axis. So if I simplify here, negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2, divided by 2 is negative 1. Okay. My other answer, negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4, divided by 2 is negative 2. Okay. So here is my final answer. Okay. Let's try this again for number 2. For number 2, remember that we have A, B, C. The next thing I'm going to have you do is write down that A equals 1, B equals 4, C equals 1. The reason we do this is sometimes A, B, or C might equal 0. Okay? If A equals 0, then we know that we won't have any solutions, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Now, our next step is to make our substitutions. Again, I have this equation, so negative b, so it'll be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 1, all divided by 2 times 1. Then negative 4 plus or minus the square root, 4 squared is 16, 4 times 1 is 4, all divided by 2. To keep simplifying, 16 minus 4 is 12, divided by 2. Now, I have come to a point where 12 is not a perfect square factor, okay? So I could simplify this into, find square root factors of 12 and simplify it that way. Okay, if I do that, I have negative 4 plus or minus. Well, 12 is 4 times 3. And so the square root of 4 is 2, radical 3, all divided by 2. Okay, so I could do that, and this could be my final answer. But what I want you guys to do is we are going to be using our calculator to, so we're going to use our calculator to round to the nearest hundredth, okay? And we will have two answers, one positive, one negative, okay? They will be rounded. We're going to round to the hundredths place. Now I'm going to do this first with one of these calculators, okay? So I type in negative 4 plus, okay, and it's going to be the square root of 12. I'm going to hit enter. I get my answer, and then divide by 2. This will get you the correct answer using the calculator correctly. So it's negative 0.27. Now I'm going to go back real quick. If I would just at this point go divided by 2, notice how this answer is now different from what I wrote down. Okay, so what this does when you do it this way is it does not divide the entire expression. It just divides that radical 12. So again, you don't want to do that. You just want to come up with your solution with your numerator, hit enter, then hit divided by 2. Okay. What you can do as well, and I'm just hitting the up button, you can go over and hit minus. Do this again, enter, divide by 2, and here we have our second answer. So it is negative 3.73. I'm going to go ahead and do number 3. Number 3 will also have a decimal answer, and I'll do number 3 with the graphing calculator. If you are doing all your work correctly and at the very last step not coming up with your correct answers, it is a calculator error. You're not using it correctly, and then you need to make sure you're asking me or someone else for help on how to do that. Okay, let's go ahead and do number 3. Number 3, we need to make sure it's in standard form. So that means I'm going to subtract 7 from each side. So I have 8x squared minus 3x minus 7 equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and label. So I have a equals 8, b equals negative 3, and c equals negative 7. Now that I know what all of my variables mean, I'm going to use my formula, okay, and make my substitutions. I'm going to start with x equals negative, and now I have a negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 quantity squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 7. Notice what I'm doing now that I'm dealing with negatives. Include those parentheses. This is where often little mistakes occur, which will end up getting your whole problem wrong. So now we start simplifying. Negative times a negative, I have a positive 3 plus or minus. It is going to be negative 3 quantity squared, which is a positive 9. Negative times a negative, I have a positive. So 4 times 8 times 7 is 224, all divided by 16. I'm going to keep simplifying. 9 plus 224 is 233. That is not a perfect square. And at this step, we can just go ahead and come up with our two answers, one with 3 plus, the other one with 3 minus. Pulling out my graphing calculator, okay, so I'll have it this way. You guys can, here we go. I have it turned on. I'm going to do 3 plus, again, to get the square root, we hit second, 233. Okay, then I hit enter. Then I'm going to go ahead and divide that by 16. Okay, and I have my first answer rounded to the hundredths is 1.14. Now what I could do is I could retype 3 minus, or I could go up using my up and hit enter. And then when I hit enter, move arrows around, the cursor around, hit minus, then hit enter. And then again, this simplifies my numerator. Once my numerator is simplified, I can divide by 16, and I have my second answer. So rounded to the nearest hundredths is negative 0.77. Okay? And so we will try number 4 together next time I see you. Let's flip it over, though, because on the back, we're going to talk about something called the discriminant. Okay? The discriminant is the expression underneath the radical sign, okay? That b squared minus 4ac, okay? This discriminant is used to determine the number of real solutions of a quadratic equation, okay? So there will be questions when given this without the use of a graphing calculator, how many solutions it would be. Now remember, a solution for any quadratic equation is also known as your x-intercepts, okay? This is where it crosses the x-axis with the parabola. And then just remember, typically with x squared, we will have 2 solutions. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. So let's start with this first one, where same as the front side, where I'm going to write what each A, B, and C are equal to after I make sure everything's in standard form. A is 1, B is 2, C is 5. Now I'm going to, again, use what's underneath the radical, the discriminant, make my substitutions, and simplify. So it'll be 2 squared minus 4 times A times C, which is 4 times 1 times 5. When I simplify, I get 4 minus 20, and this is negative 16. This negative 16 is a negative number. That's what I have to make note of, is that it is a negative number. When I have a negative number, I have no real solutions. Okay? So what that means, I'm going to go ahead, grab this graphing calculator, and graph this for you. So this was x squared plus 2x plus 5, and if I hit graph, do you see where my parabola is? It does not intersect the x-axis. Okay, so this parabola does not have any solutions. Let's try this again. For my next one, same thing, we'll go ahead and say A equals 1, B equals 10, and C equals 25. We'll make the substitutions and simplify. So 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 25. 10 squared is 100. 4 times 1 times 25 is 100. When I simplify, I have 0. So when I have 0, for my discriminant, I have a 1 solution. And what that looks like, I'm going to again show this to you. You see how the parabola touches the x-axis? Okay. That is, if I would factor and solve, I get x equals -5 and x equals -5. And so just the vertex of that parabola touches the x-axis. Okay, and so the last one that we'll do, I have a equals 2, b equals -7, c equals 2. We'll again simplify, substitute and simplify. So b squared, make sure that -7's in parentheses. I have 49 minus 16, and that is 33. 33 is a positive number. And I have 2 solutions when that occurs, and then again showing you what that looks like. So 2x squared minus 7x plus 2. Notice my parabola intersects the x-axis twice. And so again, to know how many solutions you're going to have, all you have to do is figure out the discriminant. Negative numbers are 0 solutions, 0 is 1 solution, positive numbers are 2 solutions. I'm going to let you guys know you do have to have this memorized. There will be a question about this, and your graphing calculators would not be allowed to be used. Okay, that's it guys. I will see you next time.